There's an old saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? Sometimes that comes up in guitars, particularly with high-end tone wood. So today we're going to test the mother of them all, Brazilian rosewood, with this Collings against East Indian rosewood with this very similar Martin. So stick around. Hey, you're watching Alamo Music TV. My name's Chris McKee.
I'm Cooper Greenberg.
We're here with Alamo Music in San Antonio, Texas, and you can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like our videos. If you want to support the channel, visit our spring store link below for custom swag and check out our podcast, the Fretboard Confessional, wherever you get your podcasts. So as we said at the outset, today is kind of a test of Brazilian rosewood. It gives us a chance to feature these two amazing guitars, but also kind of put this very famous tone wood up to the test. So to do that, we've got two guitars today. I am holding a Custom D28 Authentic, which is an Adirondack top, authentically kind of golden era built guitar with East Indian rosewood back and sides. To compare it, we have a really cool early 90s
91. Yeah.
91 Collings
D2H
with
Brazilian.
With the Brazilian and Addy top as well. Now this beautiful guitar came to us. Of course, it's secondhand. It's not new old stock from 91. It's a beautiful guitar.
Yeah. Both of these were actually trade-ins that I think either one we'd be happy to have.
Yeah.
Yeah, both incredible guitars. Got traded in. And this came to us from a friend of ours that bought it from a cool shop in Palo Alto.
Griffin.
Yeah.
Griffin Strings.
Shout out.
Yes.
But yeah, very cool. Case is perfect. Got all the original stuff in the case. Really, receipt and everything. That he believes the Collings receipt from 91 was written in wax, like pencil.
Like a wax pencil by Bill Collings. It's
yeah.
Pretty likely.
Sweet. And then that one was also brought in, and we have shown off quite a few authentic D28s, but never one like this. This is the custom shop version, straight up Adirondack, not VTS, and East Indian rosewood, not Guatemalan, and it's got a truss rod.
And it's got a truss rod, yes, which is one of the big key differences. Sometimes people are turned off by the lack of truss rod, so here you go. You can have your cake and eat it too, as they say. So the big question is, and this has come up for years, is Brazilian rosewood worth it? So Brazilian rosewood was, at the time, what you would have found on a 30s, 40s, 50s Martin back in the day. Really through the 60s until the early 70s is when it started to get cut off because of CITES treaty basically banning it from being cut and imported and exported and so forth. And so you still had some guitars, even to this day, there's enough Brazilian rosewood that's out there. And so you can have a guitar built with it, both from small builders as well as big companies like Martin, Taylor, and Collings and so forth. But you will pay through the nose for it, mostly because of its rarity.
Yeah.
But the question always comes back to, going back to those old guitars, how much of it was the wood that was being used, the old growth Adirondack, the Brazilian rosewood that was available, and is it really that good of a tone wood? And so I think, like a lot of things, there's a law of diminishing returns, right? Yeah. When it comes to scarcity and what you're willing to pay for it. But as a tone wood, I remember Bob Taylor, when I was at the factory like 10 years ago, someone asked him, because they were doing some Brazilian rosewood guitars, is it worth it? And he would say, it's earned its reputation. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, and then I've put together kind of a unique comparison between these guitars so that you can get a truly, A-B comparison difference. But what are your thoughts, first of all?
I mean, I have not played a ton of Brazilian guitars. I think this year we've had one other one besides this come in, which is that PRS. Very cool guitar. The big thing for me is, like, you go to Martin, you want a Brazilian guitar. That line item adds, I think, $35,000, something around there. And so it's really not feasible for most people out there to get a new guitar with Brazilian. I think this guitar is not a cheap guitar, but finding something like this, if you were to go to Collings and get a Brazilian, that's also going to be way more expensive than this today. However, I like what people are doing with Honduran. I like what people are doing with Guatemalan and Madagascar. We've had really good representations of all those this year. And if I'm, as a normal guitar player that has normal person money, I'm never gonna stick my nose up at East Indian
Yeah.
because it's great tone wood.
It's interesting because a lot of people have certain, I think, expectations of what is going to be happening with a rosewood guitar. And what I hear from a lot of people is, oh, well, that's going to be a bassy guitar. Yeah, sort of, but also no. Rosewood guitars are also the brightest guitars. They have the most treble response, and they have overtones, to complement what you're doing. It's a very rich, saturated kind of tone. But when you look at, there are a few companies over the years that have tried to make some kind of visual representation of a spectrum of what you can expect. And what I always find interesting is when you look at these representations of East Indian Rosewood, on the bass side, it's usually the bassiest. And when we look at some alternatives like Coco Bolo, we might say, well, it's got a tighter bass response. And so it's not as kind of full loose bass as East Indian Rosewood would be. When I've looked at comparisons visually, comparing, say, East Indian Rosewood to Brazilian Rosewood, usually the description is that Brazilian Rosewood has even more overtones and even more bell-like treble response and a little bit less bass than East Indian Rosewood, which I find to be interesting based upon how people would usually kind of think, oh, well, that's going to be the richest sounding. Rich and bass are not, we're using words to describe sounds. It's one of those things. Yeah. We're using words to make sounds too, incidentally. That's how it works.
Once you start thinking about it, the world is nuts.
All words are made up anyway. So how do you put it into, how do you quantify it and how do you compare it? Here's what we did. We've taken these two very, very similar guitars. They're both dreadnoughts. They are both definitely following a certain pattern that Martin laid out, that Collings has done an amazing job of also following that heritage and tradition of. They're both Adirondack tops, but there are going to be some differences in how these builders have approached the final, quality of building. And of course, there's differences in age and there's differences in the tone woods. This is a new guitar. It's not an age top. It's Adirondack. It's East Indian Rosewood. That is from when I was in middle school. And it's an Adirondack top that has opened up in age over time with Brazilian Rosewood. So there's already going to be some differences, but what I want you to listen for, and as we were recording this, Josh made sure to point out, this is the PSA for you. Get some headphones so you can hear the nuanced differences with this, or really good monitors. If you're listening on your phone, come back later because you're just not going to hear it. But I think what you might pick up on is that the expectations and the descriptions of these woods maybe carry through. So take a listen. All right, so there you have it. That's kind of our, putting these things to the test. And I want to hear from you kind of what your thoughts are between these two guitars tonal wise, and I'll give my assessment.
Well, I like them both, and I have enjoyed playing both of them. I think that one's interesting because although it is pretty spotless for a guitar from 1991, it feels played in,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that is very much attributed to the age of the top having years to expand and everything. I think this one feels a little bit tighter, but also I think there's some psychological neck going into that too, where it's like the neck is a little bit thicker on this one, so
Yeah.
you're already attacking it in a different kind of way. But I love this guitar, and I think for somebody that loves the Authentics but kind of wants it a little bit more affordable, but the truss rod, I think this is fantastic. I just feel like that one had a little bit more focused, concentrated kind of sound. And this is like a big boomy guy. And I think there's place for both of them. But tell me what you think.
So I think that one has this kind of thickness in the mid range of the guitar. And it still sounds like Rosewood. There's this, scooped mid range, but it's just a thick sound.
Yeah.
This guitar has a lot more high end treble response to it, which again is kind of what I would come to expect from a Brazilian Rosewood guitar. But Josh and I were talking about it as we were recording the guitar. You can hear that response and that chime that's coming out of the guitar. And here's what I find interesting about this. We've kind of talked about tone with guitars, right? It's all physics. You aren't getting more of something; you're getting less of something.
Yeah.
And so if you have a guitar like that where you hear less treble, that just means the trebles are more dampened than in this guitar. When East Indian Rosewood has less mid range, that means the mid range is dampened, not that bass and treble's really been increased. And so it's interesting to kind of hear that there's this response that comes out of this guitar where you really get that through the whole spectrum of the strings. It's not just you're hearing the high end strings, you're hearing a high end response kind of through everything, which is really, really nice. And the neck is really nice on this. What's interesting to me, going back to what you said a second ago, from the secondhand standpoint, you can find somewhat vintage instruments that are Brazilian Rosewood, like in the 60s. Late 60s Martins aren't necessarily considered the best vintage guitars, but you can find Brazilian Rosewood ones, and it wouldn't cost you what a modern build would make. In this particular case, how much would Collings charge you to do this guitar today? Because we've got this as a pre-owned model at $12,000, which is not inexpensive, but comparatively,
I would guess that a new Collings would be in the 40 range,
right?
Yeah.
So I mean because
a regular D2H is what, $8,000.
Yeah. Yeah. So an expensive value, but a value nonetheless. Same thing with this one. I mean, we've got this one as a secondhand marked at about $5,500.
Yeah.
Whereas if you bought like the normal Authentic is what, $8,000 now, $9,000. So guitar prices would keep going up, but there's a way to get into kind of the Brazilian Rosewood things. It's still expensive. There's no way around it, but it's less expensive.
Bonus round. Let's talk about cheese for a moment. I feel like, because I've been thinking about this all day and I'm hungry, I think that you could talk about back and sides woods as cheese on a burger.
Okay.
Right? I think that Rosewood as a family is like cheddar.
Nice. I like that. You got your medium, your mild, your sharps.
Yeah.
Longhorn.
Yeah, exactly. You got all these different ways to put cheddar on a burger, and a lot of people like cheddar on a burger. I think mahogany is American cheese. And I only say that because in my mind, American cheese is the only cheese that belongs on like a smash burger, and it's readily available and it's delicious, and it sounds good.
A cheeseburger is the only time I ever want American cheese.
Exactly. Yeah, we're talking strictly burgers here. But sometimes you need a little bit more richness.
Yeah.
And you can get a little bit more umami richness, like the low end of Rosewood, and a little bit more sharpness if you go for like a nice English style white cheddar.
Yeah, that's a good point. I really like the sharpness of like a good sharp cheddar or a longhorn,
Mhm.
particularly when you have something nice and fatty because it complements it so well. We were making like a tomato bisque, the other day, and it was my job to make the grilled cheese because I make the best grilled cheeses in the entire world. Because when you're making a grilled cheese, nothing else matters at that point. You just have to focus on getting that perfectly golden brown crust. And here's the thing you got to do. You got to toast the inside before you toast the outside.
That's a good call.
Toast the inside, put the cheese
Mhm.
on, toast the outside. Butter. Don't use mayo. What is the matter with you, you
Mayo's
communist?
that's actually not bad.
No.
Mayo gets a good crust.
I'm going with a good Irish butter and a really nice sharp cheddar or a
Mhm.
longhorn cheddar, and it's going to complement the fat that's in that soup really well and the butter. If you go with something that's like, too soft of a cheese, a little, or even like a mild cheddar, it's blending in. You need something.
You need a
In the
push.
same way, you need that brightness and those overtones to complement
Yeah.
Adirondack very well. I'm hungry now.
Zero Cote is blue cheese.
It's blue cheese.
Very good, but a little too much, it'll kill you. Maybe that's Coca-Cola, actually.
That's Coca-Cola.
Yeah, I think these are two
Smokable.
great representatives of the cheddar family. A lot of richness in both, and maybe just different
What's
meat
Gruyere?
blends. Gruyere? I don't know, probably Alpine spruce or
Alpine
something.
spruce
maybe.
is
That's
Gruyere.
top of it, I guess.
There you go. Pair your Gruyere with some longhorn cheddar.
That's a good blend right there. Yeah, I'll take either of these. That's my final thought. I'll take them both, actually.
Yeah, that's actually what I said when we finished recording. Is you know what? I would take both of these guitars. They're fantastic. I'm blown away with this one. Collings makes a really great guitar anyway, but this is very cool, and I'm impressed, given its age,
Mhm.
that it's in such incredible condition. So
And it's interesting too to look at that Addy top and how tight grained it is versus this one,
yeah,
which both are cool. There's no issues with either, but I always like seeing really good, well-maintained guitars of other eras and seeing how different the tops looked,
it's very cool.
So sweet.
Well, if you like information on either of these guitars, you can go to our website where we have all of the cheeses. It is
alamomusic.com.
and you can ask us, you can chat with us, all sorts of stuff. We can help you find the perfect guitar. And I'd like to know your comments on the video, on the test. Could you hear the difference? Which one did you like better? Do you think Brazilian Rosewood is worth it, or is it maybe inflated because of its scarcity and people like it from a collectible standpoint? Or do you think it's really worth it as a tone wood? So let us know your comments below. As always, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.